Hello there! Today I'd like to talk about the Fire Emblem series, specifically the continent Fódlan that serves as the setting of Fire Emblem Three Houses and Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes. Of all the settings in the Fire Emblem series, Fódlan probably has the most dense lore and story of them all. There are many mysteries that lurk in the background of the two games set on the continent, and can only really be experienced if one delves into optional content like certain support conversations, paralogs, and readable books and documents in the games. Even then, these story threads have to be put together by combining information from that optional content with that of the main plot. This is what I want to do here today, look at some of the mysteries of Fódlan and what we can figure out about them. Without further ado, let's get started. The Blue Sea Star is an astronomical body that is important to the mythology of Fódlan. It appears in the skies above Fódlan starting with the Blue Sea Moon, equivalent to the month July, remains there until the Ethereal Moon, equivalent to the month December. According to Yuri and Happy's support line in Three Houses, it is really big and may not necessarily be blue, though Yuri seems to be confusing a different star for it. The star is said to be the home of the goddess Sothis, and its appearance in the sky is always accompanied by celebrations of her rebirth. According to the official teachings of the Church of Sirius, Sothis saw Fódlan after a long journey and chose to land there. Likely due to this, stars are a prominent symbol used by the Church of Sirius that worships Sothis. However, it is also noted later in the game that the Blue Sea Star is located millions of light years away from the planet that Fódlan is on. This would mean Sothis travelled for millions of years before arriving on Fódlan. Edelgard does not believe this could be true, but it is unclear whether or not it is. Little is ever said about the Blue Sea Star or the place Sothis originated from in general. Finally, it is likely that the Blue Sea Star is Fódlan's equivalent of the blue star Sirius. Both Sothis and her daughter Saros are named after that star, and the theme of Rhea, who is in actuality Saros, is called Gazing at Sirius. It is also said that there are beasts that guard the Blue Sea Star, and that the Ashen Wolf's house was named after those beasts, meaning they are wolves or at least canines. This may be a reference to the constellations Canis Majoris, of which Sirius is a part, and Canis Minor. This could also mean that the orb the wolf on the Ashen Wolf's flag stands on may be a depiction of the Blue Sea Star. The children of the goddess, or the Nabateans, are Fódlan's versions of traditional Manaketes. They have pointy ears and various shades of green hair by nature. Their origins lie with Sothis, who is said to have given her blood to birth them. Sothis herself took the appearance of a human woman when she arrived at Fódlan, implying she initially appeared as something different, though it is unknown if she has a dragon form as well. Nabateans, like other dragon species in Fire Emblem, can transform between a human and a dragon form. Each form also has an associated name, with the human form getting a traditional name, while the dragon form gets something that's more akin to a title. For example, Saros is also called the Immaculate One, Keyhole the Hammer of Judgment, Sethlin the Benevolent One, Indek the Immovable, and Maquil the Windcaller. There are also two Nabateans who are known to be called the Vigorous and the Steadfast, whose remains were later made into the hero's relics Eretbar and the Aegis Shield. Furthermore, each Nabatean is a dragon type associated with the crest they carry. They also have hearts known as crest stones that appear to be the source of their power. Each is also associated with the major arcana from tarot, though only a few connections are made explicit. The crest of Saros stands for the High Priestess, the crest of Indek for Temperance, the crest of Maquil for the Magician, the crest of Gautier for Death, and the crest of the Beast for the Devil. How exactly family relations between the different Nabateans work is also a bit unclear. Saros often refers to Sothis as her mother, which is befitting for a child of the goddess. However, other Nabateans only call Sothis the progenitor god, or just Sothis, implying their relations are more distant. Of note is that it is said that Saros is Sothis' last child, so maybe she remembers a closer bond with the goddess than her family. Sethlin, meanwhile, is the daughter of Keyhole and an unnamed woman, who may have been a human or a Nabatean. It is unclear how Sethlin would have received a crest that is different from her father's, so her mother may have been a bearer of the crest of Sethlin before her. In her ending with Linhardt, Sethlin, Flame, is implied to become the mother of several children that share her crest, so it seems unlikely that she herself received a crest different from that of her parents. Perhaps the crest and associated title are passed down from parent to child. Lastly, Sethlin also refers to Maquil and Indek as her uncles, Keyhole never seems to refer to them as his brothers, so perhaps they are the brothers of his wife instead. Perhaps these Nabateans are descendants of the original ones birthed by Sothis, meaning there could be multiple Nabateans of each dragon type. When they have children with each other, the child may inherit one of their crests, titles. When a Nabatean has a child with a human, it seems to produce a crest-bearing human instead. The hero's relics, the main legendary weapons of Fódlan, were crafted from the bones of Nabateans killed by humans. Crest stones of those Nabateans supply the relics with power and are best wielded by humans with the associated crests. When done so, the relics course with power and move as if they were alive. From the design of the relics, it may also be inferred what parts of Nabateans they were. The roots of Nabateans, the crest stones, are located on their foreheads, marked by a triangular outcropping. The hero's relics, meanwhile, have holes in which the crest stones can be inserted, seemingly corresponding to the forehead of a Nabatean. This is best exemplified by the Aegis shield, which resembles the front skull of a dragon with 2 eye holes and a triangular outcropping in the middle. The other side of the shield, this is roughly where its crest stone goes. Something else is the sword Bloodgang, but its connection to the Nabateans requires the explanation of a peculiar effect associated with the hero's relics. In the final chapter of Silver Snow, several high-ranking members of the Church of Seiros transform into white beasts because they possess a part of Seiros' crest stone. Seiros has gone berserk. The beasts vaguely resemble the Immaculate One. This is similar to how when those who do not have crests use a hero's relic, or when someone simply uses one too much, they also transform into demonic beasts. The implication seems to be that such beasts resemble their respective Nabatean. The elite Maurice was the wielder of Bloodgang and transformed into the Wandering Beast after using it too much. The shape of Bloodgang corresponds with one of his horns, and at the base is located the crest stone, which would thus be embedded in the forehead. The actual triangular patch is located beneath his horn, however, so maybe not each crest stone is located directly beneath that patch. Regardless, several other heroes' relics appear to be similarly be horns or forehead outcroppings with crest stones at their bases. Luin, Eredbar, Freikugel, Thyrsus, the Lands of Ruin, and Vilnod. The blade of the sword of the Creator, meanwhile, appears most similar to a spine, with the part separating the hilt perhaps being another forehead protrusion. Tomes like the Suttunger's Mystery, Hrothi, and the Ichor Scroll appear to be simply wrapped in Nabatean bone, with further identification being difficult. The same goes for the remaining relics that are made of parts of small bone or other unidentified structures. During the War of Heroes, Keyhole, Zethlin, Indek, and Makruil fought alongside Seiros as the Four Saints, and they later became important figures in the Church of Seiros' mythology. However, there was another group of saints that served Seiros, known as the Four Apostles. They are the focus of the DLC campaign Cindered Shadows and were called Timotheus, Noah, Chevalier, and Alban. They each bore crests that were named after them, and given their cooperation with the Church of Seiros, it is likely that they were Nabateans instead of humans bearing crests. At the time, the Church namely hunted the original humans bearing crests for their hand in the genocide of the Nabateans. When the construction of Garreg Mach Monastery was completed, they poured their blood into an object known as the Chalice of Beginnings during the Rite of Rising. This was meant to bring about the resurrection of Sothis, who had been killed by the human Nemesis and those who slither in the dark, or the Agarthans, ancient enemies of the Nabateans, before the War of Heroes. However, the ritual failed. Bearing the blame for the failure, the Four Apostles scattered across Fódlan, and it is said they are lost to history. In the present day, the characters Hapi, Constance, Balthus, and Yuri bear their crests, and their backstories, along with descriptions of the fates of the Apostles, can be used to figure out what those ultimate fates were. Timotheus is said to have sought the lush forest of Adrestia's mountains, and he could talk with animals according to ancient texts. At the time, the Adrestian Empire covered all of Fódlan. Assuming the statement also reflects the present day, this would likely mean he went on to live in the Ogma Mountains or around the Morgaine Ravine. Present day, Hapi bears this crest, and she is originally from an isolated forest village, a place where Timotheus would have settled. Hapi is thus likely a human descendant of Timotheus, as she also shares similar powers over beasts to him, which were exaggerated due to Agarthan experiments. Noah is said to have traversed Fódlan's fangs and settled on the coast beyond. What happened to her is explained in Constance's report with Edelgard in Three Houses. Noah settled on what would become the territory of the Imperial House of Nivelle, and she became its originator. Her descendants obscured their origins before serving Adrestia, and when they were ennobled, Noah passed her crest off as that of Saint Makruil's, a crest that already existed within a bloodline within the Empire. Constance is thus a human descendant of Noah. Chevalier is said to have traveled to the mountains and vanished beneath their peaks. The one who bears this crest in the present day is Balthus, whose mother is from the isolated village of Kupala, located among the eastern mountains of Fódlan's throat. In his report with Claude in Three Houses, it is explained that there is an ancient bloodline in the village, and in his report with Yuri in Three Houses, it is told that Kupala once battled with people trying to conquer it. Village elder gave them some red stuff, blood, to wounded soldiers, and they made a recovery. Some of them disappeared and others manifested Crests, which is likely where the powerful bloodline came from. It is possible that the elder in question was Chevalier, who used his own blood to save his home. Finally, Oban is said to have faded into shadow in a town untouched by day's light. It seems this was a settlement in the west of the Holy Kingdom of Fargus, as this is where Yuri, who bears his crest, in the present was born. About 20 years before the events of Three Houses and Hopes, plague swept through Fargus and Yuri was affected by it. His mother saved an old man at the time who taught Yuri to read and write according to a support line with Violet. The elder also saved him, after which his crest manifested. The old man would die not long after. The support with Sothis, who is actually Keyhole, Sothis believes the old man was Oban. He also mentions that Oban believed his blood was cursed, likely due to the failing of the Rite of Rising. The Rite of Rising is the first known attempt of Sarius, later known as Rhea, to revive her mother, despite this being considered incredibly taboo according to Sothis in Fire Emblem Heroes. Case of the Rite of Rising, this was done through a Chalice of Beginnings, which was said to be a gift from Sothis, but was actually crafted by Sarius. After the rite failed, the four apostles sealed it in the Chasm of the Bound at the grounds of Garreg Mach, and during the events of Shindered Shadows it is recovered. The chalice does not resurrect the dead, however, and only produces monstrous umbral beasts, Nabatean-like creatures that lack skin and are covered in loose blood vessels. Looking at the design of the chalice also reveals something interesting. Its texture looks similar to that of some of the heroes' relics. It contains four triangle-shaped indentations, bring to mind the four heads of Nabateans. Those are laid in with small triangular parts, perhaps shards of the crest stones of the four apostles, meant to channel the power of their blood to revive Sothis. However, Rhea's attempts did not end with the Rite of Rising. She still had Sothis's crest stone and her remnants in the form of the Sword of the Creator, so she buried the stone in a body she created. She did this 12 times, but each was a failure. The 12th attempt was Citri, who was always sickly and fell in love with Knight Captain Gerald. The two had a child together, but they did not breathe. Citri begged Rhea to take the crest stone of Sothis and put it in the baby, which she did. The baby, Byleth, started breathing again and became a vessel for Sothis' spirit. Citri's body was hidden deep under Garreg Mach, but remained pristine, likely due to her nature as an artificial creation. Gerald, meanwhile, fled Garreg Mach after he suspected Rhea had tampered with his child. Byleth grew up as an emotionless person and could talk with Sothis, who lived in their head. During the events of Three Houses, the two of them merge, and Byleth's hair color changes as a result. This prompts Rhea to attempt to revive Sothis once more, as Violet could act as a vessel for her. This does not come to pass in Three Houses, but is seen in Three Hopes, where Sothis takes over their body completely to get revenge on the Agarthans. Chapter 11 of Three Houses, Throne of Knowledge, Professor Manuela asks a peculiar question. During that chapter, the existence of the Holy Tomb is revealed under Garreg Mach Monastery. The monastery is located in the Ogma Mountains in the center of Fódlan, fairly inhospitable area, and this leads Manuela to speculate that the monastery was built in this location to be near the Holy Tomb. However, she then goes on to make an interesting observation. Garreg Mach and the Ogma Mountains lie at the center of Fódlan's three nations, the Adrestian Empire, the Holy Kingdom of Fargus, and the Leicester Alliance. However, two of those nations were founded well after Garreg Mach was built. Manuela questions why this is. It is interesting that the game itself calls this out in this way, and there may be an actual answer to this question, but it does require looking at the origin of both Fargus and Leicester in detail. To start with, before the founding of Fargus and Leicester, Fódlan looked more or less like this, politically speaking. The Adrestian Empire had been founded at the start of Fódlan's modern calendar in the south of the continent at the city of Enbar by Sarius, and Emperor Wilhelm I. As mentioned before, they would go on to wage the War of Heroes with Nemesis and the Ten Elites, who lurked in the north of the continent according to a scholar in chapter 17 of Crimson Flower, Field of Revenge. About 60 years after, the war ended with victory for the Adrestian Empire and the unification of Fódlan under its banner. Nemesis and the 10 elites were killed, while their descendants became the new nobility of the empire. The Church of Sirius had been founded by Sirius as well in the beginning days of the empire and received multiple branches throughout Fódlan after the war, in the east, west, south and center. The central church came to be seated at Garrickmach Monastery near Ogma Mountains in the center of Fódlan. The monastery's construction was completed in the imperial year 185. Until the imperial year 747, the hegemony of Adrestia stood as Fódlan only had to wage war with foreign nations like Dagda and Bridget. However, this changed when Luke, a descendant of the elite Blythids from the north of Fódlan, rebelled against Adrestia. He demanded independence for the region of Fargus, which started the War of the Eagle and the Lion. In this war, Luke was aided by 2 advisors, Kaifon, a descendant of the elite Frodarius, and Pan, a strategist of whom much has been lost to history, and who is only really mentioned in Ferdinand's aid support with Pilate. The war was a success for Luke, as he won it, and afterwards the Church of Sirius mediated between Fargus and Adrestia. The church supported Luke's right to rule in Fargus in exchange for Sirius religion to become Fargus's official religion, and the right to publicly proselytize in the territory. As such, the kingdom was called holy and retains close relations with the church even during the present day, as said by a Knight of Sirius in chapter 4 of Three Houses, the goddess's right of rebirth. 50 years after the founding of Fargus, the Leicester region in the east of Fódlan also rebelled against Adrestia. The kingdom saw this as an opportunity to expand its influence and occupy the region, declaring Leicester part of its territory. The situation remained stable for another 60 years until the death of King Claus I in the imperial year 861, which led to the division of Fargus into 3 for a while. The events of this are detailed in a novel called The Death of King Claus in 3 Hopes, given a few details in the burned remnants of a report from 3 Houses' Shadow Library. King Claus had 3 sons named Banvig, Krauver and Kite. Before his death, Claus caught a deadly fever and was so delirious he could not decide which of his 3 sons would succeed him. One day, his sister Morgiane found a note written by him that said that whoever is most beloved by the people shall have the throne. This note may have acted as the will mentioned in the burnt remnants of a report, and so failed to name a successor and demanded the kingdom be divided among the 3 princes, the Leicester region in the east, the Fargus region in the middle, and the Mach region in the west. The princes themselves also agreed to do this, and a faction of knights sided with each. War would break out between the 3 regions before long, Prince Banvig emerging victorious. He became the king of Fargus, while his brothers remained archdukes of their respective regions. In reality, the will had been forged by Morgiane in a plot to put Kite on the throne, but this had failed in the end. The situation did not remain stable for long, as when Kite died, and the lords of the Leicester region with blood ties to House Blythid refused to recognize the next archduke in line. Instead, they tried to form a republic and fought with Fargus over this in the Crescent Moon War. After 20 years of fighting, they succeeded and the Leicester Alliance was founded. This is when the modern borders of Fódlan were established. So far, this seems all like fairly typical Fire Emblem fare, as rebellions and wars that lead to the founding of nations are very common in the history of the various continents in the series. However, this does not explain why the nations all seem to be centered around Garrickmach Monastery. The contents of the Shadow Library hint that there lurks more behind these events as well, particularly in the aforementioned burnt remnants of a report. This document is interesting, as it also gives insights into a few of the recent conspiracies that have gone down in Fódlan's history, particularly the tragedy of Duscur and the assassination of Godfrey von Regen. However, the report also gives comments on the events further back in Fódlan's history. On the events that sparked the founding of Leicester, it is mentioned that the death of King Claus was likely an assassination, and in the Japanese version, whoever the guilty party was, their goal was to weaken and divide Fargus because it was grown stronger than Adrestia. It seems doubtful that Morgiane was interested in this, given what little we heard of her only paints her as being interested in putting Kite on Fargus' throne, so she might have been part of a larger scheme at play. For the events that led to the founding of Fargus, it is mentioned that Luke's army mysteriously obtained weapons that were similar to the hero's relics, was able to gather soldiers without anyone noticing. Many fishy things are lurking behind the War of the Eagle and the Lion. This makes sense, as the guilty party is mentioned explicitly in this part of the report, which details the fierce tear in the unified banner of the Empire and the common thread between all the conspiracies of this document. Agartha, mysterious tactician Pan, was one of their members and supplied Luke with weapons and soldiers. The weapons are noted to be similar to heroes' relics, which is mentioned to be the case for Agarthan weapons in the Forging Bolts, Hint of Potential in Fire Emblem Heroes by Claude. And so the answer to the initial question posed by Manuela comes into focus. The War of Heroes fought at the start of Fódlan's calendar was in many ways a proxy war between Agartha and their sworn enemies, the Nabateans. The Agarthans were responsible for orchestrating the genocide of the Nabateans in the Red Canyon tragedy through Nemesis. They also aided Nemesis during the War of Heroes to oppose Sarius. This is most clearly seen in the parallel cycles of Nostalgia and Three Hopes, where the Agarthan Epimenides is directly controlled as the player character and fights against the forces of the Empire, two of the Four Saints, and even Sarius herself. However, the War of Heroes ended badly for the Agarthans. Nemesis and his allies were killed, their descendants swore fealty to the Empire, the factions controlled by the Nabateans came to rule Fódlan. So, in response, they could do nothing but lay in wait and play a long game. They influenced the course of Fódlan's history from the shadows, starting about 400 years before the two games take place by creating rifts in the unified banner of the Empire. So a house divided against itself cannot stand. First, they helped Luke to win his independence from the Empire and split the power of Fódlan in twain. When Vargas stood to become too powerful with the acquisition of the Leicester region, they likely once again entered the scene and ensured that the alliance was created. Fódlan now has 3 seats of political power, all conveniently centered around Garreg-Mach Monastery. The monastery is the seat of power of the Church of Sarius, and Sarius, who continues to rule it under the guise of various identities. The Agarthans have also tried to attack Garreg-Mach Monastery directly with their javelins of light, which are actually orbital missiles, and always fail according to a hermit in Abyss in chapter 18 of Verdant Wind and Silver Snow. The hermit is correct, as according to Rhea in chapter 20 of Verdant Wind, the Holy Tomb was built by Sothis to repel evil, so the Agarthans are now trying their indirect approach by gaining political power. Unlike most Fire Emblem games, the continent of Fódlan is not the only region featured in Three Houses and Three Hopes. It is surrounded in all directions by other lands that are mostly hostile to it, and in turn the Church of Sarius in return forbids official contact with those regions. Despite this, few things are known about them. Shreng is a peninsula north of Fódlan, separated from the Holy Kingdom of Vargas by the Ruska Mountains. At one point the entire peninsula was named Shreng, but when its southern half became part of Vargas, only the northern half retained that name. And due to being so far north, it is an infertile wasteland covered in snow and ice and rocky deserts. One of those deserts became the home of the Windcaller, Saint Macwheel, after the War of Heroes. Buildings were made to worship him. The people of Shreng also have been able to invade Fódlan for at least 200 years in search of more fertile ground. They have always been driven back. These invasions led to the construction of fortresses in the north of Vargas, including Conan Tower, and later the descendants of the elite Gautier would receive the northern part of Royal Bay territory for Laetitia Gautier driving back an invasion. She oversaw the construction of fortresses in the Ruska Mountains. The hostilities continue in the present day between Vargas and Shreng, as the late King Lambert and Matthias Gautier have led battles against Shreng and repelled invasions. A similar invasion is also fought off in a parallel in Three Hopes. Almyra is a large country to the east of Fódlan's Throat, a mountain range which consists of fertile prairies, deserts and mountain ranges. These people are known to ride wyverns and horses and relish the thrill of battle, which has led to them invading Fódlan many times. Fódlan, this led to the construction of the fortress Fódlan's Locket in Fódlan's Throat and the founding of the Officers' Academy to prepare Fódlan's noble to deal with potential threats. The defense of the Locket since then has fallen to House Goneril of the Leicester Alliance. In more recent times, Tiana, the daughter of the ruling Duke Oswald von Regen of the Leicester Alliance, fell in love with the King of Almyra and moved there. She had a son named Khalid, who eventually came to Fódlan under the false name Claude. Other known people from Almyra include Claude's elder half-brother Shahid, the General Nader, and Cyril, who was orphaned at a young age. Later he was captured and came to work as a servant for House Goneril and then for the Church of Sarius. Morphis is a country to the southeast of Fódlan and consists of desert. It's also the name of a city in it that was known as the City of Illusion in the distant past. At present, magic still abounds in Morphis, and there is an intricate web of trade routes that have also reached Fódlan via the port of Boelmas in southern Adrestia. Brigid is an archipelago to the southwest of Fódlan with a tropical climate that is described as the perfect union of the gentle sea and nature's bounty. In its history, it has often been fought over by the Adrestian Empire and Dagda, with the archipelago being subjugated by Adrestia at the start of Three Houses and Three Hopes. Culturally, the people of Brigid are known to be good hunters and fishermen. They also have stories of people who have spirits inside them, who are said to be able to fly or race across the ocean. These people have shining hair and eyes, similar to Byleth after they merge with Sothis. patriarch from Bridget and the granddaughter of its incumbent king, while her father was killed in a war against Adrestia by Leopold von Berglis. Dagda is a continent far to the southwest of Fódlan and Bridget, of which there is little information due to the distance. It is likely a large continent that houses many climates, not unlike Fódlan. It is not even present on in-game maps, only being present on the globe in the library of Garreg Monastery obscured by clouds. However, its size there seems too small given its description, and the map is also somewhat inconsistent with the expanded world map from Three Hopes. The full extent of Dagda was shown off in the trailers for Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, as Dagda serves as the setting for the game, showing that it is a continent that is much larger than Fódlan. Dagda also has a history of war with Fódlan and has at times allied with Bridget to do so, and Adrestia launched at least one successful counter-invasion of Dagda. For people in Relics, Shamir is originally a mercenary from Dagda. The pagan gold statue in Abyss under Garreg Mach depicts the Dagdan god of fate, and the Fretters of Dromai, a hero's relic, ended up in Dagda after some elders from Fódlan fled there after the War of Heroes. Finally, Albania is a continent to the northwest of Fódlan that does not have much going on. Few humans live there due to its inhospitable, cold climate. It is known to have traded with Fódlan via the port of Nouvelle. Shez is the protagonist of Three Hopes, and a mercenary who likely met their demise at the hands of Byleth during their mercenary days prior to coming to Garreg Mach in the main timelines of Three Houses. While they appear to be a simple mercenary at first, their origins are shrouded in mystery as they share their body with a being known as Arval, who can grant them great power. This parallels how Sothis inhabits Byleth's body. Shez is thought to be in their late teens, as they are said to be around the same age as the students attending the Officers' Academy of Garreg Mach Monastery by Archbishop Rhea. It is unknown who their biological parents are, as they were raised by a woman in a secluded mountain village. The village was situated in the Ordelia territory in the far south of the Leicester Alliance. Various support conversations, more details are given about this time of their life. To Yuri, Shez tells that their adoptive mother took them in when they were abandoned. Most of their support conversations with Ash are dedicated to their mother. It is said she was a smart woman who knew about most things, including magic. She also taught Shez arithmetic, to read, and to navigate using maps, things that are noted that only nobles are taught in Fódlan. Finally, to Claude, Shez explains that their mother at one point fell ill and died. They were then chased out of the village, and they fell in with a mercenary group when they ran out of money. Shez started out by doing their laundry and eventually worked up to become a fighter, which is where we find them at the start of Three Hopes. The backstory of Shez raises some questions, but is mostly just vague on its own. However, Shez's body also houses the being known as Arval. He awakened when Byleth is about to kill Shez, and granted them power that allows them to survive the encounter. The presence of Arval, who does not have any memories either, raises many more questions about where Shez originally comes from. Arval's origins are explained more in Chapter 15 of Three Hopes, the Hour of Vengeance and the Parallel Cycles of Nostalgia. In the former, a man called Epimenides, who looks identical to Arval, talks with Arval. He explains that his race wavers at the brink of extinction and that he seeks to reclaim the world for his people. He created Arval and seemed to have sought to place his own soul within Arval, but this is a dangerous technique that can lead to irreparable consequences if an essence is wrongly transplanted. Initialization of Arval's consciousness faced an unforeseen accident, proved to be useful to Epimenides in another unspecified way, which would allow Arval to become Epimenides. Identity of Epimenides is made more clear in Cycles of Nostalgia, an introductory cutscene of Three Hopes. There, he's seen fighting in the War of Heroes that transpired more than 1,000 years ago. We fight against the forces of the Dresdian Empire and the Four Saints, led by Saint Seros, leading several dark mages in battle, aiding the forces of the Liberation King Nemesis. Also references Thales, the leader of the Agarthans. This makes it clear that Epimenides is an Agarthan. This is further made clear by the presence of ruins that bring to mind Shambhala, the underground home of the Agarthans, the void of Zaros, where Epimenides and Arval reside. The introductory cutscene of Three Hopes then shows how Epimenides met his end, and how Arval failed to initialize. During a battle of the War of Heroes, Epimenides led some Agarthan mages into battle and caught the attention of Saint Seros. She transformed into the Immaculate One and killed the Agarthans, including Epimenides. Before that, water is seen rushing and we see some markings that indicate this is inside Shambhala. This lines up with how Arval's initialization is described. All of this begs the question as to what the Agarthans are. They appear to be very long-lived, as Thales was around during the War of Heroes, still the Agarthan leader in the present day. They're also capable of shapeshifting and do not want the secrets of their bodies to be revealed, as Thales says in chapter 10 of Three Houses. In chapter 22 of Three Houses' Verdant Windcloud, Fódlan's New Dawn, the history of the Agarthans is explained. They were the original humans who inhabited Fódlan and were a technologically advanced civilization. At some point they waged war against Sothis and her children, the Nabateans. In that war, Fódlan was all but destroyed and the Agarthans retreated underground to Shambhala to bide their time. Sothis would eventually use her power to restore Fódlan, though this took an extremely long amount of time. The Agarthans are thus human and also consider themselves as such. In the Romance of the World's Perdition, a book found in the Shadow Library, they are described as the children of men. The book was likely written by the Agarthans and tells of the war against Sothis from their perspective. But that begs the question as to how they are so long-lived and have abilities like shapeshifting. A hint might be found in the concept art of the Agarthan Solon, which reveals something interesting about his gloss and eye. These pieces of concept art, which are reflective of Solon's final design, reveal that his body is integrated with advanced Agarthan technology. His gloves are sewn directly into his arms, and his unblinking eye allows him to store knowledge and magical power. Furthermore, in chapter 10 of Three Houses, where the goddess dwells, Solon pulls an object from the chest of fellow Agarthan Kronia. He shatters it and uses it as fuel for the forbidden spell Zaros. The object is hard to make out, but appears to be metallic in nature. Many Agarthan units also have the special skill Agarthan technology. The Agarthans are thus most likely humans who use their advanced technology to cybernetically enhance themselves, giving them long lifespans and the ability to shapeshift. They do not want the humans of Fódlan, who they consider beasts, to discover this and go to great lengths to keep the contents of their bodies a secret. Furthermore, in Three Hopes, it is also implied that they sometimes switch out bodies when their current bodies give out. They talk about this flesh when they are wounded and how it has run its course, likely referring to this. With all of this context, it becomes clear what Shez's relation to Arval is and what their origins are. Epimenides was likely the one who invented the technique to rehouse souls, allowing the Agarthans to swap out their bodies. Arval was supposed to be a backup body for Epimenides, but things went awry when their consciousness was initialized. Everything was lost according to Epimenides, but then Arval proved useful in a different way. It seems likely Shez was another backup body of some kind. Solon confirms in the Hour of Vengeance explicitly that Shez is from Shambhala. In chapter 10 of the route A Sure Gleam in Three Hopes, Fanaticism, the Agarthan Mycen wonders why Shez wields the power of Epimenides and mentions something about his core. It seems the core is what is transferred from body to body with the Agarthans. It may have been the device that Solon pulls out of Kronia in Three Houses. The core of Epimenides was first housed in Arval and came to house their rudimentary consciousness as well after their initialization failed. It was then transferred to Shez, who was created in Shambhala. The streaming water that Arval and Epimenides reference is likely a liquid where they were held in while in stasis, perhaps in one of the holding pods on the lower levels of Shambhala that are seen in Three Houses. Lord Raphael is a member of the Golden Deer House, which represents the Leicester Alliance in the east of Fódlan. 3 years before the start of Three Houses, his parents were killed by monsters according to his in-game profile. In support line with his friend and fellow Golden Deer student Ignaz in Three Houses, more details are given about the event. Both Raphael and Ignaz's parents were merchants working in the Alliance, and Raphael's parents were attacked while they were traveling for work. It happened after Ignaz's parents declined to work that job because they had other business, so they recommended Raphael's parents instead. This all seems straightforward, but is complicated in the parallel death toll which involves both Raphael and Ignaz. It is revealed at the start that merchants traveling from the lands controlled by House Gloucester of the Alliance to those of House Regan suffer far more monster attacks than those traveling in the opposite direction. Of note is that House Regan is the leading house of the Leicester Alliance. Battle of the Paralog involves saving merchants from such a monster attack. However, there are also some people mixed in with the monsters who seem to be controlling them. These are identified as Alliance generals who speak of performing some duty and not looking forward to telling account if they fail to kill the merchants. The aftermath of the battle, surviving merchants speculate that Count Gloucester is behind the attacks because he is unhappy with the merchants contributing to House Regan's wealth. Presently, it is also said that such a scheme was behind the death of Raphael's parents. At the time, they were traveling with the incumbent Duke Regan, called Godfrey, because Count Gloucester had invited them to strike a deal about some art pieces. Raphael's parents were brought along to assess the value of the pieces in question, while met their demise at the hands of monsters. This is not where the story ends, however, as both the Shadow Library added in Three Houses DLC and Three Hopes elaborate on these events. In the burnt remnants of a report, it is written that the Church of Saros was suspicious that the death of Godfrey was not an accident, a conspiracy masterminded by Count Gloucester. War between Gloucester and Regan was averted according to the Japanese version of the report, due to the sickness of Duke Oswald von Regan. The question becomes as to why Count Gloucester would orchestrate the assassination of Godfrey von Regan, leaving House Regan to the leadership of his elderly and ailing father Oswald. Given that Oswald dies during the time skip in Three Houses, it is safe to say that the goal was to cause a crisis of leadership in the Leicester Alliance. At the time Godfrey is killed, the existence of Claude is not yet known in the Alliance after all, as he only came to Fódlan 2 years later. A power vacuum would have been created in Leicester without Godfrey after the death of Oswald. House Gloucester is also an important house in Leicester and Lawrence. Count Gloucester's son often emphasizes how he wants to lead Leicester in Claude's stead in the main game. This bid may have been for House Gloucester to take control of the Alliance. However, the burnt remnants of a report also emphasized that Count Gloucester might not be behind this conspiracy. It seems too conspicuous in the words of the report, and there is implied that there might be another party at play. Three Hopes further elaborates on this idea, first of all by giving a name and a face to Count Gloucester, Erwin Fritz Gloucester. He is shown to be a pragmatic leader who wishes to protect the people of his lands and is willing to switch sides between the Adrestian Empire and the Alliance during the war that breaks out between the three nations of Fódlan during the game. He is less focused on becoming leader of the Alliance than his son Lawrence as well. Furthermore, Three Hopes directly gives more details on the incident wherein Raphael's parents and Godfrey von Regan were killed in the Paralogue Unsettling Truths. The Paralogue, Lawrence, now called Gloucester after his father retired, Ignaz and Raphael go to confront a group of bandits wreaking havoc in Gloucester territory. It just so happens that these are the same bandits who worked as mercenaries for Erwin and were responsible for the death of Godfrey. Bandits are apprehended and questioned by Lawrence, where more information is revealed. Bandits claim that when they still worked as mercenaries, they first had normal jobs like protecting villages. However, they one day received orders from an envoy of Erwin to threaten merchants going to Regan territory. They balked at this idea and instead chased monsters into the path of the merchants to scare them away. This worked at first and might be what was seen in the Paralogue death toll. People in that Paralogue were identified as Alliance generals instead of mercenaries, thus this might be an oversight, for the mercenaries were hired to be generals working on behalf of Gloucester. Nonetheless, this all eventually leads to the incident where Godfrey and Raphael's parents were killed. It seemed the envoy was someone from House Gloucester acting alone. By the time Erwin learned what happened, according to Lawrence, the culprit had vanished. Instead, Erwin punished the mercenaries and they became bandits afterward. The question remains as to who this culprit is. In Unsettling Truths, it is said that Erwin refuses to discuss these matters with Lawrence, instead changes the subject when it comes up. Ignaz, meanwhile, calls out a scheme like this one that seems ill-befitting of Erwin's character and motivations of protecting the reputation of the nobility. It does, however, fit the modus operandi of the Garthans. They are able to shapeshift, and so one of them could have easily impersonated someone from House Gloucester to orchestrate the death of Godfrey von Regan. The Garthans had also been sowing political turmoil in Fódlan in the years before Three Houses and Three Hopes take place, as they also had hands in the tragedy of Duscur that plagued the Holy Kingdom of Fargus. If Erwin was aware of the Garthans' involvement is hard to say. She is never seen directly commenting on these events. Three Hopes seems to clear him of most suspicion. But if he believed the death of Godfrey could benefit his people, he might have turned a blind eye, given his pragmatic attitude. Speaking of the tragedy of Duscur, this is an event that is important to the recent history of the Holy Kingdom of Fargus. It occurred 4 years before the start of both Three Houses and Three Hopes, and led to the assassination of Fargus' King Lambert and the subsequent subjugation of Duscur. However, the exact events are mired in multiple layers of conspiracy from multiple factions within and outside Fargus. As such, it takes some work to get a clear picture of what exactly happened in it. The tragedy of Duscur is about the peninsula of Duscur. It sits roughly northwest of the Holy Kingdom of Fargus and was separated from it by the sacred Gwenhwyvar Mountains. According to the Dew and Sylvain C support and Violet and the Dew's B support in Three Houses, the two regions used to be friendly with each other for a long time and they were even allies. This was set to change in the imperial year 1176. When King Lambert, his son Dimitri, his second wife Patricia, and some knights from Fargus were visiting Duscur, were attacked. All of them were killed except for Dimitri, who was saved by Gustav, a knight who had stayed behind in Fargus. Among those killed was the knight Glenn, the older brother of Felix and fiancé of Ingrid. In the aftermath, Lambert's older brother Rufus became regent of Fargus, and the people of Duscur were blamed for the assassination. As a result, the Duscur region was violently destroyed by the kingdom as retribution. The land was burned, and many of the people were slaughtered. House Clyman, a very minor noble house of Fargus, played a large role in the subjugation according to the Register of Kingdom Nobles, and was rewarded with the entire Duscur region as its feudal estate. In the year these events took place, together known as the Tragedy of Duscur, Lambert was also planning major political reforms in Fargus. This is explained by Catherine in Mutiny in the Mist, chapter 3 of Three Houses on the Blue Lion's route, as well as that this caused Lambert to gain enemies. Christoph of House Gaspard, a minor noble house of Fargus, was accused of being involved with the tragedy and subsequently executed. That is the story of the tragedy on the surface, but there is more to it and its roots run very deep. The earliest ones go back to the coronation of Lambert, as Lambert had an older brother named Rufus, and in chapter 3 of Azure Gleam, Scholar speaks of the rocky relationship between the two. Rufus is said to be smart and unrivaled in politics, with Lambert being the polar opposite, although he had a gift in tactics. Rufus did not have a crest of Blathed, while Lambert did, which is why Lambert became king despite being the younger brother. Rufus meanwhile became the Grand Duke of Itha, a small territory northeast of the central Blathed territory. He may not have been necessarily happy with that arrangement. Roots of the tragedy of Duscur continue around the imperial year 1160, when Fargus was beset by a plague, as explained by Sylvain during the exploration section of chapter 8 of Three Houses. Kingdom Knight in chapter 18 of Azure Moon explains that the source of the plague was the poorly constructed water system in cities like the capital Verdiad. Cornelia, a scholar from the Adrestian Empire, advised that top priority should be given to improving cities' infrastructure. This made the diseases go away, and in return she was given a position in the royal court of Fargus. Chapter 19 of Azure Moon, Dimitri also says that before she was given this position, her personality entirely changed. In imperial year 1171, as explained in chapter 8 of Azure Gleam in the Dimitri and Happy support line from Three Houses, Adrestia grew politically unstable, and Cornelia requested that her old friend, Lady Anselma, be rescued. Anselma was a consort of Emperor Ionius IX and the mother of Princess Edelgard. She was banished from the court due to a political dispute and was rescued by Lambert. Around the same time, Edelgard and Anselma's brother Volkart von Mundel also sought asylum in Fargus. Cornelia arranged this. Eventually, Selma and Lambert developed feelings for each other and got married, when Selma went under the name Patricia. The fact that Patricia was from Adrestia and her very existence were kept obscure from the public, with Cornelia regulating the few visits she and Lambert were allowed to make with each other. The fact that Edelgard was kept in the kingdom was kept a secret as well, to avoid the Empire demanding her extradition. Cornelia meanwhile told Patricia that Lambert kept Edelgard away from her, until Edelgard and Volkart returned to the Empire in imperial year 1174. 2 years later, Lambert set out to perform his aforementioned political reforms. This made nobles in the west of Fargus, specifically Viscount Mattheus, Viscount Aladur, Viscount Gideon, and the Lord of Clyman, at this time ruled over a single castle, unhappy. But they did not wish to talk with the king about their concerns. This is because they were sure that they would be drowned out by the king's supporters in the east, such as Roderick, the Duke of Fraldarius, and Matthias, the Margrave of Gautier. Due to all the existing tensions within the kingdom, Cornelia was able to manipulate those unhappy with Lambert's reign into assassinating him. The Western lords because they did not agree with political reforms, while Rufus seemed to have desired the throne. She was also able to get Patricia to join in because she promised her that she would be able to see Edelgard again. Conspirators arranged some Duscur guides, as explained in the Three Hopes Paralogue Wildflowers for the Future. When the attack happened, one of these guides was responsible for the death of Glenn, according to Ingrid. Meanwhile, Rufus claims responsibility for killing Lambert in chapter 3 of Azure Gleam. The conspirators, however, were ordered to keep Patricia's carriage unharmed, and Patricia herself was kidnapped, though Thales claims that she was killed at some point afterwards during chapter 17 of Azure Gleam, the end of tragedy. Dimitri was the only one to survive the tragedy and saw his attackers, knowing they were not of Duscur, and thus did not believe the official story behind the tragedy, as explained in his B support with the duo from Three Houses. He would ultimately be saved by Gustav, while Rufus was rewarded by becoming regent of Fargus, and the Lord of Clyman gained the land of Duscur and the title of Viscount. Everyone involved also received money and supplies from Adrestia as recompense. This implicates the Empire as well, but to understand its involvement, a closer look needs to be taken at Cornelia. Because all of this does not yet explain why Cornelia masterminded the tragedy, why her personality suddenly changed, why she made life so awful for Patricia that she was convinced to kill her husband and stepson. This is because Cornelia was replaced by the guardian Cleobulus, who is the true mastermind behind the tragedy. As for why Cleobulus did all of this, the answer is possibly found in the non-Crimson Flower routes of Three Houses. During the time skip in those routes, Cleobulus murders Rufus and frames Dimitri for it. This allows Cleobulus to take control of the kingdom and to transform it into the Vargas dukedom, with it allying with the Adrestian Empire in the war in the second half of Three Houses. In Three Hopes, Cleobulus seemingly attempts to set these events into motion early by manipulating Rufus into staging a coup against the major noble House Fraldarius. The claim is that House Fraldarius is trying to control Vargas by eventually installing Dimitri as a puppet king, with Rufus attempting to gain the aid of the Western Lords again. If this were to succeed, Cleobulus could rule through Rufus without opposition. The gambit doesn't pay off in the end as Rufus is killed and Cleobulus has to go on the run. And that's everything I wanted to talk about in regards to Fódlan and its lore for now. Hope you enjoyed this video and hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.